Thank you, Kevin. I'm an alcoholic and my name is Craig. Good evening, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you're coming from. I want to thank the Serenity Improvement Group for the opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope, bring some purpose to my evening, and certainly feel like you are definitely here for me more than I could be for you right now. It's interesting being the good, extreme alcoholic I am. About a month ago, I had the whole weekend planned out. I was supposed to be one of the several speakers at a workshop in upstate New York, and I saw the Serenity Improvement on my schedule for Saturday evening, but I wasn't speaking at that time. So I was like, I'll do everything. I'll do both, and no problem. I'll get it all handled. And before I realized, I was in the hospital about a week ago with my mother, and she's diagnosed with stage 4 small cell lung cancer. And I had to cancel going up to the workshop, and I just got back from visiting her, and life changes. I have no control. It's the thing that A has taught me the most. This delusion that I have any control over my drinking or anything else is just that, the delusion. And I'm in good shape. I'm at peace. My mom's in reasonable shape. The family's doing well, but it's a tough time. But I share this with you. I'm sober over 25 years. My sobriety date is November 28, 1998. And without these steps, I wouldn't be able to be useful right now. I would make everything about me. And even if I didn't make it about me, I'd be either so choked up or confused or neurotic or emotional that I wouldn't even be able to be helpful. And I feel at peace today, which sounds weird saying it out loud, but I feel at peace today, looking down the barrel of life with my mother. And I'm so grateful that she's been in her own program for several years. And just before I got here, we read a passage out of her literature. She's a member of Al-Anon, and I've always had great relationships, even in my AA service career, with the organization Al-Anon. We cooperate, don't affiliate, but we definitely learn from each other. And I did that just with her at bedside. And again, that's something else you did for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, was you opened my mind to the ability to learn something I didn't really have the capacity to do. Let's see. My family, I mean, before I was born, my grandfather had already died from alcoholism. By the time I got here, we had, let's see, a couple guys in jail ripping out sinks, the women running around neurotic trying to figure everything out. Grandmother full-blown alcoholic, other grandfather full-blown alcoholic, uncles and cousins alcoholic and incarcerations, a lot of institutionalism in my family, a lot of neglect, abandonment, some of those things we read in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I really ID with that book. I really ID with what alcoholism means and the devastation of the illness, not just the fact that I obsess about alcohol, not just the fact that once I ingest it, I have no control when I'm going to stop, and not just that spiritual malady, but all of the ramifications long before the alcohol was even inside my body. And even today, over 25 years sober, what alcohol does to a family, even far removed. I started drinking at a very, very young age. I mean, I was literally in the back of a New York City cop car at 5 years old. That was more of a lesson. It wasn't like I was a serial killer or anything, but they were teaching me a lesson. But still, like, this is what I was doing already, instead of playing at the playground or whatever kids did at that age, right? And I grew up in New York City, North Jersey, and I grew up in Jersey City, and I was a young kid always trying to like feed the homeless and rescue animals, like I had a good heart. But I lost access to that so quick because I got engulfed in the survival of dealing with alcohol in my family. And then of course my self-imposed crises of my own drinking and my own self-centered nature. But I started drinking very early, not that it really did much to me, but it was there. There was Jello shots, there was hard liquor, there was, a little bit of beer left in the cans and bottles, and, everybody left it laying around, and I had no problem scooping it up and seeing what I can get out of it. Very interesting because I never liked the taste of alcohol. Even if you fast forward to my drinking career where I was doing it every day, I hated the taste of alcohol, which really helps me identify with that short line in the chapter called Doctor's Opinion in the Big Book, where it says that we essentially drink for the effect of alcohol. That's a characteristic of an alcoholic that I identify with. I definitely drank for the effect. I didn't drink, for the social aspect of it. I didn't drink for the taste. I drank for the effect. Alcohol probably did something to me around 11. I don't know exactly when, but I'd say probably around 11. And I grew up, I mean, this was normal. I tell this story all the time. I'm crossing the Brooklyn Bridge, and my mother, the beautiful woman that she was, she worked 3 jobs, had holes in her clothes just so I can play sports or have, clothes on my back. And I'm crossing the Brooklyn Bridge and I'm looking up at the sun. And I guess that's what I would have considered myself as a higher power back then. And I'm begging this higher power to like make this car go off the bridge because I just didn't want to be a part of the family I was in anymore. I spent so much time and energy thinking about how I wanted to kill myself or how I wanted to kill somebody else because I was always so angry and sad. Didn't know those words, didn't know how to identify it. And again, I'm not taking it down the lane of therapy. I'm telling you, this is alcoholism. This is what I explored and endured before drinking, while drinking, and then I'm going to get into after drinking here in a minute. But this is what I'm thinking at 8 years old. And I just wanted the car to go off the bridge and kill my mother, and somebody to just take me out of this situation. Even though I can tell you today, and not just because my mom's in a terminal situation, but that she always did everything for me. I wasn't really mad at her. I just didn't want to be part of that family anymore. So alcohol did something to me probably around 11. It saved my life. I really believe it saved my life because I think I would have eventually killed myself or murdered somebody and whatever. Yes, even at that young age. It's almost like right out of a movie. And I'm skipping all the stuff in between, all the multiple visits from the police and everything that is happening even before I'm 11 years old. But as you can imagine, when alcohol finally did something to me, I was off to the races quick. And I didn't drink because I needed courage to talk to the girls or anything like that. Like I was fine in that department. I wouldn't say I was popular, but I was fine. Like on my sports teams, I was good at sports. I knew how to get along with people. Like it wasn't liquid courage for me by any nature, but it was definitely the courage to get outside of my head. It gave me some sort of relief of what I obsessed about all the time, which was myself. I really think alcohol saved my life. And then just as quick as it saved my life, it started to destroy my life very quickly and very promptly. And probably 17, 18 institutions by the time I was 19 years old. That doesn't include juvenile detention centers, outpatient therapies, or anything of that like. But crisis intervention centers, I remember 17 years old, 3 times in one day. They put me in a straitjacket. I escaped, put me in a straitjacket. I escaped. What an insurance nightmare and what a hassle that must have been for my mother to have to deal with that all day, every day. I was having delirium tremens at that age. Then I remember being in what was like an ACU unit, like you're not incarcerated, but you're kind of locked in a rubber room and just having like some of the most intense panic attacks, just not knowing what I was going to do without alcohol. I'm thinking this stuff at 17 years old. So I hope if there's any old timers in the room that do make jokes about newcomers, don't do it, especially those that are young, because I was going through all that at 17 years old. Would get out, would drink again, drink again. I didn't even understand. And the reason I love Alcoholics Anonymous service structure is because listen to all the alcoholism I've already shared with you in a very short time that I was surrounded by, I was a part of, I engaged in, I participated in. But when I went to these centers, even while I was medically detoxing from alcohol, nobody talked to me about Alcoholics Anonymous. Nobody. Which is why it's so important that we get involved in our home group. In my experience, we get involved in the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous and help people understand what makes an alcoholic, where is AA, what do we do, what do we not do, all of that stuff that our 12 traditions and our 12 concepts kind of talk about. which we can get into another time, but just wanted to put that plug there. Um, so alcohol, again, I would get in, I would get out, and if you're a real alcoholic like me, you identify with the fact that your illness talks to you in your own voice. There was definitely days I needed to drink just to shut my mind up. I would get out of an institution and, somebody would tell me to throw on a meditation tape and, go to a meeting and, whatever, all this kumbaya stuff that, of course, I was unwilling to do, had no desire to do because I was arrogant and I knew enough. And then there's also one thing, I don't like to just totally call myself arrogant. I was in a situation where I felt I could only rely on myself. And at that point, I was surviving, but it wasn't working anymore. But I still thought I knew better. But I needed to drink just to quiet my mind up sometimes. And I also just needed to drink to get out of that, what we call the mental obsession in the starting on like page 23 in the big book, where it really starts to describe that mental obsession. It says in the book that we lost the power of choice. And I'm over 25 years sober, and I would tell you that I still don't choose not to drink today. I choose to come to this group and share my experience, strength, and hope. I choose to pick up the phone call from my sponsee. I choose to call my sponsor. I choose to be involved in service, whatever the situation is. But I don't ever want to be in a position where I think I'm choosing to outwit, outmaneuver, or outdo alcohol, because I've lost that battle. I'm done. I surrendered in my first step. Incarcerated. I didn't realize it at the time, and I was, again, DTs and shaking and throwing up, and it's real detoxing from alcohol. And I didn't understand why I wanted to kill myself, and it's because I had a problem with alcohol. But I didn't even understand that. As much as I drank, as much as I knew I had a problem with it at that age, I didn't understand that that's what was going on. It talks in our book about having the physical craving, the mental obsession, and the spiritual malady is kind of the 3 points of our illness as we describe it in AA, as we believe. I definitely have the hole in the soul, the spiritual malady. I shared with you from a young age, just feeling that, and always either needing to be the best or feeling like the worst, always worshiping something outside of myself, not being able to sit still, and all of that stuff that we kind of all go through. Sometimes in AA, we call it egomaniac with inferiority complex. You can call it whatever you want. The point is, I don't know how to sit still. And I don't know how to think reasonably without alcohol inside my body. When you take alcohol away from me, it's even worse. That's what really helped me identify as an alcoholic when I got a sponsor and went through the book, was when the alcohol was removed, that's when it got bad. Some people whose life just gets better once alcohol is put down, they may not be alcoholic. I'm not here to say who is and who isn't, but for the alcoholic of my variety, it doesn't work that way. It's the alcohol that gives me that peace of mind, that comfort, that ease. It's you take it away, and I'm angry and raw and terrified and resort to trying to control the uncontrollable, trying to manage the unmanageable. And then there goes the tornado that you've all witnessed, either from your own spewing of it or someone else's. The physical craving, it's interesting because every now and then I'd have a couple, right? But I could never set out, like let me just be honest, like there was never like a Friday night for me. There was never like going to the bar or the golf course or any of that. Like I was drinking all day, every day in the same 4 city blocks, and I was drinking and driving. I was drinking under trees, drinking at the park, drinking on top of buildings, passing out in all different places. I mean, that's, once it went in, all bets are off. But every now and then I'd have 1 or 2 and just kind of pass out or something like that. But it was never that I said, oh, I'm going to have 1 today and go home. I certainly had that lie towards the end when I would get out of rehab yet again. And there's really nothing more hilarious if you think about it. I'm going to have 1. Like, think about how insanely hilarious that is. I'm just going to have 1. I mean, I don't even know what to say. It's crazy to even think that. But that goes back to my point of we lost the power of choice, because it's not the physical that brings me back to the drink. It's the mental. It's the mind that always talks me into to going to have that one drink. It's the mind that always talks me out of showing up for the home group. It's the mind that always talks me into hanging out at the bar, even though I'm not drinking. It's the mind that talks me out of working the steps. And I say it often, what's crazier, being in Alcoholics Anonymous and not working the steps, or drinking? To me, they're equally as insane in my experience. And that mental obsession, like I shared with you earlier, like my mind would not stop thinking about alcohol. It was very literal at times, alcohol, 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 screaming. And sometimes it was subtle and manifested in all these little different manipulations to get me to get back to the drink or to have more. And that's what I did, even at a very young age. And I never had a legal drink, but I still needed to have a stash. I needed to have some before I went somewhere. I needed to have some after. I needed to make sure somebody had some. I didn't want to tell anyone how much I actually had because I needed some more, but I wanted to seem like I was a nice guy and share a little bit. So I had separate bottles where I would share that one, but keep that one. All of this madness, which I'm sure most of you understand what I'm saying. Here's something I really identify as being alcohol too. My grandmother, and this is alcoholism in my family. My grandmother, she ended up passing away and dying. When she died, she was yellow. She clearly had cirrhosis of the liver. But we didn't call it that. We called it diabetes because we didn't want to talk about alcohols. It's just not what we did. But I remember getting a call. I was in Jersey at the time. You're 16. I mean, I was 16. You're allowed to drive at that time. I think you were. I don't even know if it was allowed to. Don't quote me on that. But I was told, hurry up and get to the hospital. Put on the hazards. Come see your grandmother. Your grandmother's dying. And I needed to make sure I drank before I got there. And long story short, I didn't make it to the hospital on time. And I used to think I was such a horrible person, but I realized by going through this book and having a sponsor and going through these steps that I was sick. I told you I used to rescue animals and feed homeless. I was a good kid. I was great at sports. I cared about my community. I cared about my family, even though my family was crazy, even at a very young age. Some people might even said I was special, but I lost access to all of that to the point where I couldn't even get to my grandmother as she was dying at the hospital because I needed to drink. Today, I'm free from that. That's an asset today. That helps me identify with the young man who's 36 years old at the hospital and needs a liver. And the doctor says you can't drink. If you drink, you're not going to get a liver. And what does he do? He still drinks. He's got 2 kids, a wife, and he needs a liver, but he still drinks. That's me, the hopeless variety. I'm so grateful that I was hopeless, that I didn't have the answers anymore. And I'm so grateful that I'm more desperate today than I was when I got here. More desperate today. Have to keep getting involved in the group, keep getting involved in service, keep sponsoring others, keep sharing my experience, strength, and hope, keep going through those steps and taking a look at my defects and corrective measures and what I could do better and make amends as they prop up and be willing to admit I'm wrong. Not because I'm a saint, not because I'm even a decent guy, but because my life depends on it. I get to have some purpose and usefulness and be happy, but it's really because my life depends on it. And I just feel bad for the alcoholic that doesn't see it that way. And I don't mean that in any ill intent or sarcasm, or I'm not trying to offend anyone, but if you're alcoholic like me and you just don't think that you need this thing or something, I mean, we don't know everything here, but something, I'm just so grateful I have something. I mean, think about what I'm sharing with you. And by the way, I don't want to give you the whole long list of how tough life is right now, but literally my dog who I rescued, which is another story we could talk about another time, but she's getting operated now for cancer. We just got a letter from a guy, Miguel, who's sick. We got everything with my mom, and I'm like focused. I'm still able to facilitate my self-employed job. I'm still able to be there for my stepson, be there for my wife. I'm able to show up for my mom every day, bring her to radiation every day, sit by her bedside. Like I couldn't even show up for 4 minutes when I was out there drinking. And the only reason I showed up for court is because they made me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have showed up for that either. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and like I said, 17, 18, however many institutions, and I got sent down to South Florida and got kicked out of the treatment center, even though I knew I wanted to stay sober. I was just such a like institutionalized alcoholic, immature. Like I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't have any. I don't even know what you would label me. If someone has a better term, let me know. So next time I speak, I don't got to take 5 minutes trying to describe myself. But the bottom line is, when I would go into treatment centers, all I would do was try to find ways to get in trouble, and then I'd get kicked out of them because I didn't know how to behave. So I got kicked out of that treatment center, even though I knew I wanted to stay sober, and I was homeless. There's a line in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that says, job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not get over drinking, ... fill in the blank. And basically what that means is, nothing comes before trying to get this spiritual solution. And, I've done all that. I've been without jobs. I've lost children in sobriety. I've been homeless, and I'm still sober. And I think it's because of that relationship with the higher power. And it started with a very small, tiny belief. And I don't even want to try to explain, because it's too confusing, but I understand it, where that tiny, small little belief started. But the bottom line is, I was willing to believe. I was homeless, and I got a home group, even as a guy who was homeless. And I got a service commitment, and I helped make coffee, and I met the guy there every day. He would bring the coffee because obviously I was homeless. I couldn't keep it anywhere. And we made coffee. We talk about sobriety. And then I got involved in intergroup, and I was the literature person and the greeter. And then I got involved in a young person's committee. And, you could follow that trail all through my sobriety. Like, got involved in the group, became a general service representative, then was a district committee member of the district, became an area delegate, served at the General Service Conference where we make big A decisions, worked at the General Service Office, traveled different parts of the world for Alcoholics Anonymous, like all of that from a homeless guy who couldn't stop drinking. I mean, what an opportunity to be able to give back to Alcoholics Anonymous and the organization that saved my life. Getting back to being homeless, though, I found a sponsor. I went to a men's meeting, and we started going through the book. And he gave me a prayer for my first step, which is, God, I'm an alcoholic and I need your help today. And he suggested, if you're alcoholic like me, it's not enough to just say good morning and good night to your God. It's not enough. You got to talk to God all through the day. And I took that very literal, and I did. And I went to like 90 meetings in 9 days, never mind 90, not because it was instructive, but because I was homeless and I didn't have a job, and was just trying to keep my head above water, and just kept praying and praying and praying. And I don't know if anyone else can identify with this, but in early AA, like, I can see that what you were saying was right. I could see what you were saying made sense. I believed in you. I cared, but I didn't know how to tell you that. At the same time, I knew you were right. I was still telling you you were wrong. It took me a long time. And this is why I try to be patient. I'm not the most patient, but I try to be patient with people. It took me so long to be a part of society. I was so broke when I got here. I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know how to communicate, hug, work, any of that stuff. And it was 100% because of alcoholism, nothing else. I'm a fairly intelligent individual. It's not that my work ethic is poor. I just was distracted by things other than those that mattered. I was stuck inside self and my drinking. So we started to go through the book, and we went through the preface and the forwards, and I got to learn a little bit about how long AA has been here. Got to read a story in the back of the book, which is the first instructions, and identify with what it means to be alcoholic and be a part of AA and what the solution is, and started looking at, how many countries AA is in, how many languages there are that AA has speaks and goes to, and the book is translated in, and learn about the 12 traditions and how groups stay alive. And it was real important to read the preface and the forwards, even before I diagnosed myself alcoholic, because it really empowered me to be a part of this organization. So many of us are in AA and we don't even know what it really means. And that's the truth, because we have arguments about whether or not we should talk about drugs. We have arguments about whether or not we should be anonymous at the public level. Like, if you're having those arguments, then you clearly don't know what AA is. And that's because we don't have what we should have at the group sometimes. A basis of steps, traditions, and concepts. And actually, when I first got here, I remember being in the clubhouse and everybody was talking about heroin. Nobody was talking about alcohol, and I almost left. Thank God I had a sponsor to explain and everything, but I thought I didn't belong here because I never did heroin. So I was ready to leave AA. And that doesn't mean if anybody's new here, doesn't mean if you've done drugs, you're not welcome here. Alcohol is the qualifier. Drugs are not a disqualifier. You could have done as many drugs as you want. That's not what I'm saying, but our focus is alcohol and alcoholism. And I almost left. Again, sponsorship, home group, kept me grounded. Went through a little doctor opinion, and I had all that experiences that I already shared with you, like about realizing, okay, I didn't, it's not like I woke up and chose to not show up for my grandmother. I was drinking, and I was incapacitated and unable, and I had the obsession. And I really identified with a lot of stuff it talked about in the doctor's opinion. And I understood that I was beyond human aid and power. No matter how many people tried to help me and be there for me, it just wasn't enough. Not because they didn't care or not because I didn't even want to try to change. I just didn't have the power to change. It's a very interesting concept, whether you're new or you've been here for a while, is power. Tapping into the power, asking God for the power, admitting the powerlessness. I mean, those are some of the key points. Besides sincerity, like, that's the most important thing for me to remember today, is that I am powerless and I don't have the needed power. And if you're alcoholic like me, that doesn't just mean with respects to alcohol. I'm humbled to the point where I know I wake up in the morning, I can go out there and still do my job well. I could go sell, like my mother used to say, I can go sell somebody the Brooklyn Bridge. That's not what I mean. To have an effective, useful, understanding relationship with society, I need to tap into that power. I need to use what I call the God filter and in those steps. We got to all of those chapters. We read Bill's story, and I identified with Bill and a lot of things he did, how he thought, how he drank. Even though it's written in some weird old school language and all that kind of stuff, like I understood what his thinking was. I understood what his drinking was. And I certainly wanted what he ended up getting by having a relationship with Ebby and going through the steps. And I really like that he said spirit of the universe, because I had so many grudges against religion. I saw everything from money laundering to mafia to molestation. All that kind of stuff was in the neighborhood with religion. And I'm not saying all religion was like that. I'm just saying my experience was that. So I just thought it was a total crock. But Spirit of the Universe and AA reminds me it's not a religious program, it's a spiritual program. And again, I want to be very serious about anyone in here that's religious. I know there's plenty of people that had a different experience than I do. And I honor and encourage people if they have a faith to make that faith stronger. I'm not in any way putting down religion or a church. It was just my experience. And but Spirit of the Universe and this idea that I could be spiritual and not have to go somewhere on a Sunday and deal with this guy when I know what he's really doing. It just seemed like hypocrisy, right? And the big book says we're supposed to be quick to see where religious people are right. And I really understand that today. Think about this for a second, especially if you've been in AA for a while. I know if you've been to flesh and blood meetings like me, you know that one church downtown where the meeting's held, where there's like 50 people outside smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee before a meeting. Imagine people that drive by that place. They're probably judging the crap out of us. They have no idea miracles are happening. They're like, look at those people smoking and drinking coffee. What are they doing? What do they have going on in life? They have no idea of the miracles that are happening. And I try to remember that too when I'm judgmental, when I'm driving by a church and maybe judging what people are doing or how they're dressing or whatever. I have no idea the miracles that are happening or how God's working there. So I just want to remain open-minded is the point. And that's what I learned in this whole first step. For me, My first step was coming to believe in the hopelessness and the futility of my existence, which allowed me to come to believe in the power greater than myself. But I really needed to believe in the hopelessness. I had to understand that that's it. I couldn't manage my own life. I couldn't stop drinking. What I was doing wasn't working. I had to understand that. And then we got to that second step and we got another prayer. I asked God for his protection and care as I abandoned myself to him. Please help me let go of old ways and old ideas just for today. To let go of old ways and old ideas just for today. But my sponsor told me that I could have permanent sobriety. I just needed to follow a few simple rules, and those rules are the steps. But that's a hard task for some, as we know from reading How It Works. Some are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. I was one of them. I remember my first sponsor, I didn't mention him in this because it was short-lived, but he used to tell me to go to meetings and read How It Works before every meeting, or volunteer to read How It Works. And I would feel so bad for you guys. I would be reading How It Works and I would just feel so bad for you because How It Works was about you, not me. I knew I started getting better in AA when I realized I was what they were talking about in How It Works. I'm the alcoholic they're talking about. Constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. Some don't make it. So I had an experience with the second step, and this isn't a workshop, so I won't get into every page and this and that, but it was really helpful on page 46 to 48, where it gave me the tools to start spiritual growth, and it also gave me some barriers to watch out for that would get in the way of my spiritual growth. And it was good going through that chapter and saying that prayer. And then we got on our hands and knees and said a third step together. And I really understood what it meant to want to be relieved from the bondage of self. And from that day, that prayer means so much to me. When I demonstrate God's power, whether it's stopping drinking, whether it's making amends where it's hard, whether it's admitting where I'm wrong, whether it's quitting smoking, whatever it is, getting through a child dying, like all of those things, it's not about me anymore. That's when my life changed in AA. I used to pray that I would get these things, but my life started to change when I was broke and I prayed that you got money. When my girlfriend dumped me and I prayed that you had a happy marriage. When I was sick and I prayed that you were healthy. When I started praying for others and really trying to see how my life could be more about helping the altruistic movement, that's when my life changed. It wasn't about me anymore. That's my illness. My illness is when I'm worried about my bills, my car, my woman, my kids, my mom, no matter what it is, no matter how severe the circumstance is, when I'm obsessively worried, that's when I'm stuck in my alcoholism. Self does not allow me to see clearly. So we took that third step and I started writing a fourth step, which is by far the single best thing that ever happened to me. Here's the short version. I had to write my resentments. I had to write my fears. I had to write my sex conduct, which you can draw the conclusion that I was mad at everyone, afraid of everyone, and tried to have sex with everyone. That's pretty much the bottom line. But there was a whole bunch of interactions that happened in there where I had to see the patterns of what my anger brought me to, the patterns of like I was basically angry at everything, like you name it. A guy who looked at me wrong, the New York City school system, bottled water, my mother, my father, anything and everything I was mad at. I was also afraid of everything. And it was so paralyzing because I was afraid to have a friend and I was afraid to not have a friend. I was afraid to have a job and I was afraid to not have a job. You know, I was afraid to get up in front of people and talk. I was afraid to not get up in front of people and talk. So I was literally afraid of everything. Even though when I got here, I would have told you I was some tough gangster off the street who wasn't afraid to speak or afraid of everything. I was afraid of everything. And then my sex conduct, I mean, the short version was I just used people. I didn't know any better. I can tell you that honestly, straight up. Like I wasn't really trying to be mean. I just didn't know better. I wasn't really raised to know better. So I had a lot to learn. So I went through all that stuff and I looked at the patterns. I took ownership of being selfish and self-seeking and dishonest and frightened. I took ownership of, being wrapped in fears and being abusive and blah, blah, blah. I took ownership of all that stuff and shared that with God and my sponsor. And, those patterns were so important. It wasn't so much about a confession as it was patterns. I always put myself in losing situations and I always needed to secretly be number one. And these were the little gems that I needed to see, which is why I kept finding myself in a bad position. Thank you. In a bad position. And I went through all this with my sponsor and we talked about it. And, resentment prayer, when I was going through my resentments, I asked God to soften my heart and show how I would behave just like the person I was angry at. Anyone who I was angry at, anything you could think of, from someone who actually abused me to someone who I beat up, anything, all in between, I have a side of the street. And the fear prayer, God, please remove my fear of sounding good and direct my attention to what you would have me be. That's what I say every time before I speak, because it's more about what I can be and how I could be a part of rather than, me being afraid and being selfish. And that prayer of God, please remove my fear that I said over and over again in my 4-step was very useful and brought me very close to my higher power. And looked at my sexual conduct and, the harm I caused. And I also looked at harms other than sexual, such as, not paying credit cards back, stealing money, whatever. And again, just being willing to own all of that. And then I went home and I took some quiet time and I realized that I was still hiding some stuff. And I called my sponsor and I shared that with him. And then we went on to the 6th step and I asked God to help me let go of all the things to which I still cling. And it's amazing, even after all of that work, I still wanted to hold on a little bit to lust and anger, because I was so afraid. It was my identity. I was so afraid to let go. Like, the truth is, and I understand for the real alcoholic like me, as much as I needed to let go of that, if it wasn't for those things, I wouldn't have survived out there. So they absolutely did work for a little while, but they weren't working anymore. And it was hard to let go of that. So I had to ask for the power. And the best thing I could do is say the 7-step prayer. And for those of you who've been through the steps, the 7-step prayer for me, I don't know if you identify with this, but it's really just about asking God for the strength to go out and make amends. That's the summary of it. Just asking for the strength to go do his bidding. The strength for everything we've done in 1 through 6, so I can go ahead and make this list. And another prayer that was given to me is, God, please help me clear away the debris of self-will and self-reliant living. That will be done for others as well as for me. And I started to write this list and all the people I've harmed. It was already in my 4th step, people, principles, places, things, animals. And I started to go out there and make amends to all of them. And I got a heck of a lot of amends stories, which we can get into another time, but so powerful. I mean, we talk about letting go all the time in AA. And I'm just going to share something with you as somebody who's been here for over 25 years. It doesn't mean I know everything. It's just my story. I don't know how to let go any more than I know how to stop drinking. There is no just getting up in the morning and letting go. My experience is when I go through this process and I make amends for the things I've done wrong, that's when I get to let go. So again, I'm not here. I'm just one person. But if you're like me and you're having a little hard time to let go, somebody keeps telling you, oh, just let it go. I don't get to let go until I do the work. That's my experience. So if you identify with that, you're not alone. You got to do the work. AA is very transactional in my experience. If you do this, you get that, And so a lot of that work that I did in 1 through 8 and then going out and asking God to help me do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences might be. And, return money. Like if you're going to make an amends to somebody and you owe them money, it's silly to not show up with money. Like the whole point is to sincerely make things right, which still took a lot for me to understand, because even at that stage of the game, I still kind of was just like really selfish and arrogant. Not because I meant to, I just didn't have the experience yet. But again, think of how silly it is if someone stole money from you and they knock on your door or they call you up and say, I want to talk. And they're like, hey, Kevin, I'm sorry I took that 1,000 from you. I hope everything's good with the wife, man. Thanks for the time. Like, what does that do? You know, and the key word is sincerity, because even if I don't have 1,000 to pay Kevin back, admitting I'm wrong, taking the time to own how it hurt him, giving him the time to get something off his chest, and then saying, I don't have the 1,000 right now, but here's 200, and I'm going to give you $15 a week until I pay that off. Like that just changes everything. And again, it's not because I'm a good guy. I have to do those things to stay sober, to be free. And I had so many strong beliefs and mixed ideas when I got here. And again, I thought I was Mr. Tough Guy and this and that. I'm not giving up my peace of mind anymore. So you can call me weak all you want, and I'm not saying you are, but you could make all the judgments you want. I want to do things right, because peace of mind is so much better than what I was living with alcohol, without alcohol, before AA, after AA. I just couldn't stop my mind. And now it's at peace today. I feel like I can deal with anything. I still have feelings. I'm still human. I make tons of mistakes, but peace of mind. That's what we get in AA, the opportunity to be useful and peace of mind. And then for me, I feel like you go to the next level and you want to make sure AA is here for others. That's when you want to learn about the AA history, and you want to get involved in service and the service structure and try to help make AA better, or keep it effective, or whatever, version of that you see. It's funny, the 10 step is such an interesting step. Essentially, what it's saying is to admit you're wrong, promptly, by the way, but to admit you're wrong. So I used to walk around for like a little while after I went through the steps, acting as if though I was cured and I'm not selfish anymore, I'm not dishonest anymore, I'm not wrong anymore. And, looking back, it's almost as embarrassing as, looking at my drinking. Like, I thought nobody knew when everybody knew. And I thought I was so wrong for so many years, but I was telling everyone I wasn't, or I was acting like I wasn't. The whole reason we have a step that asks us to admit we're wrong is because we're wrong often. I mean, human beings are wrong often. Some of the greatest scientists in the world are wrong, politicians, teachers. And who do you respect the most? The person who admits they're wrong. If you grew up in an alcoholic family like me, there is people right now for 30, 40 years that still can't admit they're wrong. And it just keeps the family divided, keeps the family sick. Once I started admitting I was wrong and living this thing, I can give you a whole list of people from my family that I 12-stepped into Alcoholics Anonymous, into Al-Anon, and other 12-step organizations. You're talking about a family that was devastated by alcoholism. I shared my story with you today, and I'm talking about 10, 15 of these people are now in programs. My entire house is in a 12-step program. And I'm not going to take credit for it, but what I am going to say is those things wouldn't have been possible if I didn't admit I was wrong, if I didn't work those steps. And it's less about running my mouth and telling people they need a program, and it's more about living the program, and then people wanting a piece of it, wanting to know, where's that peace of mind come from? The 11th step for me, quiet time. I used to be terrified of quiet time, because quiet time meant to me lights out of prison. Quiet time meant to me rubber room. Quiet time meant to me no one else is up anymore. Like, all of those quiet times, like, those were always scary things to me. Quiet time today is something different for me today. And you should try it, even after this meeting, if you're not already familiar with it. Whether the dog's home, the wife, the kids, whoever, just ask for 10 minutes. And you don't even got to do a kumbaya Buddhist on the top of the mountain like meditation thing. Just sit quiet for 10 minutes. Feel the presence of God. Feel the presence of being present. It's fascinating. It's so fascinating. I am so 1,000 miles a minute. I forget when I just pause how much more clear things could be, how much more effective I could be, how much less selfish I could be. I really like the 11th step. I'm going to share this with you, and I got about 7 minutes, but I'm going to share this with you. All of the steps I just took you through are something I have to do consistently, but the 11th step brings it all together for me, because it launches me out to help others in my 12th step, but it also helps me to continue to look at the things I need to change. And there's a page in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, on page 86, where there's this thing called a nightly review and an on awakening. And the math in AA is very unique. It's not like algebra in high school. In high school, 1/2 equals 1/2. In AA, 1/2 equals 0. You get nothing for half. You have to do them both. I have to get up in the morning and ask God for the power to direct my thinking and envision the day, and ask God for the power to go out and do what I learned the day before. And then when I retire at night, I look at that page on page 86. Was I selfish today? Was I dishonest today? Did I hurt anyone today? Do I owe an apology? Was I kind and loving? What could I do better? I ask God for forgiveness, and I ask him for the power to make corrective measures. And then I put them on a note card, and I take the note card and I continue to keep asking God for the power to make change. That's what's worked for me for so long, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous, AA groups, whether it's service in AA, whether it's jobs, whether it's friends. And I'm not attached to the results. I would say I'm a fairly successful person for many different reasons that we check the boxes for in America, but that's not my idea of success. My idea of success is maintaining relationships, having peace of mind, staying sober, just so we're clear. Because I might lose something or because I didn't get something I want doesn't measure success for me. Staying sober, being useful, peace of mind, helping someone open the door to get into this movement is what means success to me. There's a razor's edge of going out and dealing with the world, but also understanding that the most important thing for me is to stay sober. And that doesn't mean I quit my job and I tell my wife, I don't have time to talk to you today so I can go to a meeting. A meeting is not the most important thing for me to do, but working the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, being engaged in everything I've learned from the 12 steps and passing it on to someone, that's the most important thing. And I'm not saying a meeting's not important or anything. I just think sometimes we get confused and then we end up, having no time. If you go to 7 meetings a week, how the heck are you going to be involved in service and show up to your son's soccer game? You can't. But if you work the steps 7 days a week, you got a lot more time and a lot more freedom in your head, right? And again, to each their own. If you got to go to 7 meetings a week or whatever, I'm just throwing some thoughts out there. I'm gonna wrap this up here in a minute or two, but the 12 step for me, and I say this all the time, and it's Dr. Bob's line, not mine, but we carry the message and sometimes use words. It's really about the actions and less about the words. We need words because that's how we talk, but it's more about the actions. And all of those pieces of my family that have been 12 stepped in the program, again, was more about my actions and a lot less about my words. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I've had some interesting interactions with AA, good and bad. The humans, the program's perfect. The people aren't. I've been all over for AA, and AA's been all over for me, and it's been there for my family. And it's I just don't know how to repay it other than to continue to work this thing and learn about it and carry the message and say yes to sponsorship and service and stay involved. I mean, it's just the right thing to do. Like we say in the big book, indescribably wonderful, which is why I'm having a hard time describing to you because it's indescribable. But also my drinking days were indescribably awful, right? So there's no way to describe it, but if you're alcoholic, you understand exactly what I'm saying. And I'll just wrap up with this, like, try not to separate the world of service if you do this. Maybe you don't do this, but if you separate the world of service with recovery, try not to do that because service has everything to do with recovery in AA. The organization and the service we do has everything to do with keeping the doors of AA open, helping alcoholics to know where we are, giving us the meeting guide app, giving us literature, giving us updates to pamphlets, creating websites. Like that stuff doesn't just fall out of the sky. And not only is it important to have service so that can happen, but it's important for you to be involved in service because you're a small part of a huge piece necessary for the great whole. If we don't understand what you're thinking, what you're, because you're a piece, like we need a fair cross section of everything. And AA's informed group conscience is brilliant. I mean, it's the opportunity for all voices to be heard, but still only making decisions of the many. And that's how AA started, whether you look at the big book, whether you look at the group structure, the general service structure, etc. And for me, I just love it. How can I not want to get involved and learn about an organization that saved my life? I am literally useless without this program. literally. Want to thank you again for the opportunity to bring some purpose to my night, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to share tonight. Have a great night.